Hiya Mike, thanks for the footage. A lot of really good things going on in this swing. I think you've done a great job. What I think would be probably the best approach here is to just sort of go through the checkpoints, P1, P2, etc., and just highlight some things that are going on that are good or that need to be worked on. I think P1, I would like to see perhaps just a touch wider stance with both the iron and the driver, just to give you a little bit of stability, help move the centre of gravity back just a touch, maybe help the legs work a little bit in a little bit more powerful manner. But overall, you know, it's just a bit more stability. I'd like to see perhaps just a touch wider stance. I like the foot flare, I like the handle location, the positioning of the body weight, etc. is really nice and more than appropriate. Take a little look now. If I take you to P2 with your iron, we're seeing that the left shoulder's working down. If we do the same with the driver, again, left shoulder working down, no drifting off the ball, very stable axis at that point. When viewed from down the line, club, maybe the hands drift up a little bit, maybe the club rotates open just a little bit. And I think, to be fair, you know, you like myself, anybody who's gone through the PGA training and has had years of being told to, you know, get the club pointing skywards when it's at waist level, get the shaft in line with the sort of stance line, is bound to have a little bit of residual rolling of the club face, if you will. But overall, that's a pretty tidy takeaway. No real complaints at that point. If we take our two model swings to the same checkpoint, we can see with Grant here, left shoulder working down. We see with Charlie, I mean, this particular footage, this blue shirt footage, is easy to find on YouTube. Exemplifies a lot of the key pieces. You can see that his hands are working in a little bit more dramatically. However, he is at this point trying to emphasise that move anyway. And you can see that the club face is a little bit squarer to the arc. A lot of players would ignore that line, sorry. A lot of players are told that this position with the club face here now that Charlie arrives in is actually hooded or shut. The question then that you need to pose is shut to what? Because the club face is perfectly square to the arc of the swing. If we take a little look at your position, it's actually rolled open to the arc of the swing. Most good players who do that actually suffer from a hook stroke overdraw more than they do the dreaded slice of the amateur golfer, because they have more educated hands and tend to roll the club, as you were saying in your email, get that sort of flip action going on through the ball. So I'd maybe look at tidying up that takeaway just a fraction, get the hands to work in a little bit more at P2, and feel that there's a little bit less rotation of the club face up to waist level, as per Charlie's footage there on the bottom right of your screen. If we then move on to P3, again, really nice position. Quite a lot of loading of the wrists, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just something that you do. I haven't got a major problem with that. Because the hands worked up a little bit too fast from P1 to P2, i.e. didn't work in enough, the shaft tends to be sitting on, for my liking, a little bit too much of an upright position at that point. Again, a little bit deeper with the hands, P1 to P2, would help tidy that image up at P3. All in all, though, the tilts are pretty good. I've not got a massive problem. Trail legs straightening up nicely, left legs flexing forward nicely, wrists are loading, no real movement off the ball, so, you know, all systems go at that point. If we take it up to the top, again, accumulator 4, the left arm travels well with both driver and iron. Quite an upright look to it at that point. In the grand scheme of things within our system, what you tend to find is that the left arm would sit maybe a little bit more on the shoulder plane at that point. But again, a lot of that stems from the hands not quite working in enough from P1 to P2. I always feel that a good checkpoint, a good thought for somebody on the way back to encourage more of an inward path of the hands is to feel like the club is being swung to a point that's about 6 inches behind the right shoulder. And again, traditional coaching would have had us believe that the club should be swung on, above or through the turning right shoulder. To a degree, you wouldn't necessarily struggle too much as a better player if that was the case, but you could run the risk of just getting a little bit sort of lifted to the top and getting the arms to separate from the torso a little bit too much. So I prefer to see a little bit more of a compact position there. So again, the hands working in a touch more from P1 to P2 would help improve the overall look of that backswing, and just position the butt of the club a little bit nearer to that elbow plane line. My big concern there at the top of the backswing relates a little bit to what we were touching on before. The club face in both the driver and the irons is sitting quite open. There's a little bit of cupping in the left wrist that can be brought about by maybe a little bit too much load in the wrists from P2 to P3, and also that initial rolling of the club face, albeit slight, but there is a tendency to just roll that club face, and you'll see where I'm coming from with that as we progress into the downswing. First move down is a separation of the two centres, so we want the left knee moving down and forward out in front of the left ankle. We want the upper centre to stay fixed, and we want the lower centre to move forward. You can see that the left knee moves out in front of the left ankle, the upper centre starts to move forward, the lower centre, should I say, starts to move forward, and the upper centre is staying relatively fixed. I do feel, however, though, with my original comment about the width of the stance, things could look a little bit more athletic at that point had the base been a little bit more substantial to start with. Excuse me. But again, that's just a preference on my part. Left knee moving forward, that's the hip slide kicking in. So the left tilt that we had at the top of the backswing becomes a right tilt during the downswing when viewed from face on. The arms then are kept in at P5. Now this would be my main concern with you here, and this is where the sort of flippy impact position comes in. We're relatively open at the top, and then as you change direction, there's a loading of the back of the left hand. If you're familiar with golf machine terms, accumulator 3, I don't mean that in a patronising way, but when I first started on stacking tilt, I didn't have a clue about anything to do with golf machine, if I'm being honest. And accumulator 3 was far from on my mind when I first started down this route, understanding things a lot more as I progressed. But the back of the left hand sort of loads, and as it loads, it shallows the shaft and opens the face to the arc a little bit more. So as we're coming into P6, albeit the club is blurred, the club face is quite open and very much behind the hands. Now with an iron we get exactly the same move. We get a sort of a loading of accumulator 3, so the back of the left hand starts to load, so starts to rotate, and as it sort of rotates from the top, as you're looking at your left hand, it sort of rotates clockwise as you change direction. If you were to grab a club, swing to the top and stop, look at the back of the left hand and start down, you would see the left thumb, or the left hand, but if you were to pay attention to the left thumb, you would see it loading in a clockwise direction as you're looking at it. And that is going to open the club face and drop the club behind you. So we now have a situation when we're coming into the delivery position where we have a club that is too much from the inside, very slightly, but a little bit too much from the inside, and very open to the arc. So if you were to keep the hands very quiet, what you would now get is a huge push to the right in both instances. What we tend to then do as a better player is we tend to start to flatten out the wrists, roll the club face. You can see that roll kicking in there. In an attempt to prevent the ball being pushed too much to the right. So what we've got is at the bottom of the golf swing, we've got too much of a corner to turn. Now, granted, we have to turn a corner at the bottom of the golf swing. So we've got to trace that arc. But if that arc is too substantial, then we've just got too much of a job to do, and we just end up throwing the hands at it. So we feel a little bit stuck, a little bit trapped, and then we get that sort of flip coming through. And it's more, you notice that it's more apparent with the driver, I'm sure you've noticed this, than it is with the iron. And there's numerous reasons there. With an iron, it's a little bit easier to control what accumulator 3 is doing. The tendency is to work on top of the ball a little bit more, get the right shoulder working down and around a little bit more. So any sort of flipping of the golf club, any exit issues tend to be much more prominent with a driver than they are with an iron. There's a lot of really good things going on in this swing, but that through the hip really needs to be looked at. So what we would want to look at is the change of direction. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get rid of some of these swings, and I'm going to get you and Charlie up so I can pinpoint this move. And this is the move that I want you to spend a little bit of time working on before you send me the footage across. I appreciate this is as much as anything sort of an overview. That's what the way I've tried to keep it up to this point, but we do need to get into the sort of nitty-gritty of what you need to do. Like I say, on the way back, I'd like to see you improve that takeaway position. I'd like to see the hands come in a little bit more. The more we work on this, I mean, some of the players I work with one-on-one, we get this footage up on quite a regular basis, and you know, we work this move in. I've just recently done a recap for a gentleman called Andrew Lincoln. If you go on my website, if you go on my YouTube channel, you'll see his recaps on he's just recently done about his 3rd session, and a lot of his work has been related to this particular move from P1 to P2. And the players who I work with on this, if I said to them, you need more Charlie in the blue shirt, they would know exactly what I'm talking about. They're talking about at P2, when the shaft's parallel with the floor, there's far less rotation of the club face, there's far less rotation of the back of the left hand, and the way they work this in is by obviously looking at this image, thinking in terms of Ricky Fowler. So from P1 to P2 we'd want 0 rotation of the back of the left hand. When players do that, you'll see it on Andrew's recaps, the hands tend to trace more of an inward path, and there's certainly less rotation of the club face in relation to the arc early in the swing. Once that motion's set in place, it's much easier to control for the rest of the swing. So P1 to P2 is really important for you. The next area that you need to focus on is your transition. So as you transition, I'm just going to blow these 2 swings up for you a little bit now. Right. As you transition, you'll see that the back of the left hand loads. So we consider the position of the back of the left hand, which is accumulator 3, at P5, and we look where it was at P3. It's loaded a little bit too much, so it's in a decent position. Left wrist gets a little bit too cupped at that point, club face open, and then it loads more, and it continues to load from P4 to P5, and then still at P6, or maybe P5.7 at that point. Accumulator 3 has continued to load. That means now it's got a hell of a lot of work to do to help square that club face up. If you watch what Charlie does from P4 to P5, accumulator 3 doesn't really load that much. doesn't load too much. It doesn't continue. It just works straight down, doing very little from the top. So by the time he gets to P5.7, you can see how that shaft's not dropping down beneath the forearm line. And the club face there, you can just about make it out. Ignore that line, I beg your pardon. You can see that the club is very, very open to the arc of the swing. Whereas with Charlie's, it's a little bit squarer to the arc of the swing at that point. Try that again. There you go. So that requires less of a flip or less of a rotation on the way through. Yeah, you'll be a lot quieter with the hands because the club isn't as open to the arc as you're coming into the golf ball. Now, you can work that in through feelings, through mirror work, through rehearsals. I think your overall understanding here of what's causing you to flip. The flip is a result of the club being too much in and too open at delivery. It's too much in and open at delivery because accumulator 3 loads too much in transition and has also rolled a little bit too much in the takeaway. So the back of the left hand is really important for you improving your ability to drive the golf ball, because trying to roll accumulator 3 at speed is the most reckless thing, the most chaotic way possible of swinging a golf club. So, you know, the fact that you've got, you know, obviously some talent for the game, else you wouldn't be a professional to start with, allows you to get away with it, but it also explains a lot of your inconsistencies. One drill that's very good for this is to hit some pulls. Set yourself up. If you go onto my channel, if you go onto the drills and exercises video too, you'll see the couple of videos on there where we talk about hitting pull spectrums and push spectrums. I'd like to see you hit some pulls. Put a stake in the ground, maybe about 10 paces in front of you. Set yourself up so that you're aiming directly at that stake, and then hit some pulls left of it. It doesn't matter how big a pull it is. Once you've done that, or when you initially start to do that, you'll probably find that you pull hook it. Your goal then is to take all the left curve off that shot. Keep hitting pulls till you can hit a slight pull. Start with a big pull, take all the left curve off it. Then start to refine the amount that you pull in the golf ball. Whilst you're doing that drill, video yourself. So I want a square setup. I don't want you to aim left. Square setup and then hit a pull. When you video yourself, look at what happens from P1 to P2, what happens from P4 to P5 as you transition, and where you look, how does the club look at P6 delivery position? So how does it look at that point? The club should start to look, as you see there with Charlie, more in line with the hands and a little bit more toe down. When it does, that requires zero flipping on the way through. You maybe still want to flip the club on the way through because we've had years of doing it, but it requires less of a rotation. So you can see that this action will start to calm down. And obviously when you start doing that, I know from my own experience, I'm a serial high exiter and flipper of the golf club, as most pros of our generation are. When I'm hitting that little pull and I'm hitting it well, I could go and play a tournament doing that. I wouldn't bat an eyelid. It wouldn't even look like a pull out on a golf course. It's just the slightest little pull shot left of the cane. But you'll be surprised initially how difficult you find that to do. And then once you do start to hit that shot, you may find with the driver it becomes a little bit of a soft fade. When you are hitting that shot, video the swing, have a little look at the checkpoints, and you'll be surprised at the changes that are happening in relation to accumulator 3. The back of the left hand is the most appropriate piece for you to consider at this moment in time. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line. I will send you some emails across, some images across, and some information relating to this. Maybe a few names to watch on my channel who work on this, on trying to improve this. I've just done a recap actually for a guy called Mark Ramsdale. That's another guy you can look at. Now Mark is the opposite to you. He releases 3 too early, and we're trying to get him to load 3 more. But again, it'd be a nice video for you to watch to sort of get your head around how accumulator 3, the back of the left hand, can start to affect things during the downswing. And you can also introduce that into your coaching when you're working with your students over in Germany. So hopefully this has helped. I look forward to watching this progress. Hopefully get a chance to speak with you further on your game, and chart the progress as we go through the winter months. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email across, and we can discuss things further if needs be. Good luck with it. Thanks for the footage. Like I say, don't stand the ceremony. If you've got any questions you want to ask, feel free to just drop me a line.